Alhaji Rahman, the kidnapper, said, "We have fresh meat available." Then Alhaji Rahman asked, "Can I get 2 fresh heads and 2 left breasts?" "Of course," the kidnapper replied, looking at Chica and the 3 other girls tied behind her. Life had become a heavy burden on Chica's shoulders. As a single mother, paying rent was a struggle. Her 3 children needed school fees, and every day she worried about what they would eat. To make matters worse, her landlord had already given her a final warning about the rent. One evening, Chica stood in the kitchen, staring at an empty pot. It was almost dinner time, but there was no food to cook. Her youngest child, Tobe, tugged at her wrapper. "Mommy, I'm hungry," he said, his small voice shaking. She swallowed hard because she had no idea where the food would come from. Later that night, when her children were asleep, Chica sat in the dark, hugging her knees. Tears streamed down her face. "What kind of life is this?" she whispered in the dark. She used to wake up early to pray, sing worship songs, and trusted God with all her heart. But now, when she knelt down, the words refused to come. She felt nothing, no faith, no hope, only anger. What am I supposed to pray about or thank God for? She asked herself. For my suffering or for the struggles? She shook her head and stood up. No, I won't pray again. There's no point praying. The next day, she didn't pray either. Every time she tried to pray, the same thoughts came, and each time she gave up. Slowly, she stopped praying completely. Days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months, and Chica's heart grew cold. One day, her eldest daughter, Nkem, noticed. "Mommy, why don't we pray anymore?" the girl asked innocently. Chica forced a smile. "Just go and get ready for school, Nkem." Chica's days were filled with silent pain. The weight of her struggles pressed on her like a heavy stone. One afternoon, as Chica walked home from the market with nothing but a small bag of garri, she heard someone calling her name. "Chica!" She turned and saw an old friend, Mirabel. Mirabel and Chica had once been very close. Years ago, they attended the same church, prayed together, and even shared their dreams of a better future. But life had taken them in different directions. Chica forced a smile. "Mirabel, it's been so long." They hugged tightly, and for a moment, Chica felt safe. But as soon as they pulled apart, reality hit her again. "How are you?" Mirabel asked warmly. Chica let out a dry laugh. "Well, I'm struggling, fighting and surviving. Nothing is just working." Mirabel's face softened. "I understand, my sister. Life was not easy for me either." Chica looked at her in disbelief. "You? But you look like you're at peace. See how you're glowing and shining." Mirabel smiled. "That's because I learned to trust God, even in my suffering." Chica frowned. "Trust God?" She let out a bitter sigh. "Mirabel, I used to be like you. I used to pray. I used to trust. But look at me now. My children's school fees are due, and I don't even know what they would eat tonight. My landlord is on my neck. Tell me, what is the point of praying?" Mirabel listened patiently. Then she said, "Chica, let me tell you a little about my life." She took a deep breath before continuing. "My husband was laid off a year ago and got really sick. We had nothing. We sold almost everything we owned to survive. There were days my children went to bed hungry. Chica, I cried. I questioned God. But one thing I never did, I never stopped praying, praising and believing in Him." Chica stared at her in shock. How? How could you still pray? Mirabel smiled gently. Because I know God is still God. Even in the storm, I told myself that no matter how bad things got, I would keep trusting in Him. She paused, then added, and Chica, things started to change, oh. A miracle happened. My husband got healed suddenly, and somehow he was called back to resume at his workplace. Chica gasped, just like that? When I tell you that God is faithful, I mean it. I held on to Him in my darkest moments, and He showed up for me. Chica looked away, her chest tight. A part of her wanted to believe Mirabel's story, but another part of her, the part that had suffered for too long, wasn't sure if miracles like that could still happen for her. Mirabel touched Chica's hand gently. Sister, I know you're hurting. I know it feels like God is silent, but trust me, He sees you. He has not forgotten you. Chica pulled her hand away and shook her head. Mirabel, I hear you, but you don't understand. If it's prayer, I have prayed. Countless times, I have cried, fasted, begged God to help me. But what has changed? Nothing, Chica said bitterly. Nothing has changed. My rent is due. My children are still hungry, and their school fees, I can't even pay. So don't tell me about prayer. Maybe God listened to you, but He has ignored me. Mirabel watched her quietly, sadness in her eyes. Chica bent to grab her small bag of garri and stood up. I need to go home. Mirabel stood still. Chica, please. I'm tired, Mirabel. Chica's voice was almost a whisper. I have no more strength to pray anymore. That night, Chica lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. In the small corner of her room, her 3 children slept on a thin mattress. Her stomach growled, but she ignored it. Hunger was no longer new to her. Her mind went back to Mirabel's words. God is faithful. He has not forgotten you. Chica closed her eyes and shook her head. She turned to face the wall, her heart heavy. She still didn't pray. She didn't even try. But something was about to happen. Something that would shake her to the core. A few days after meeting Mirabel, Chica's phone rang. She picked it up and saw the name Ebere. Ebere was an old friend, and unlike Chica and Mirabel, Ebere was very wealthy. She owned several businesses and lacked nothing. Chica hesitated before answering. Hello? Chica, Ebere's voice was full of excitement. It's been a while, my sister. How are you? Chica forced a smile. I'm managing, oh, Ebere. I'm surviving, and life has not been easy at all. I'm so sorry, Chica. It is well, Ebere said gently. We need to see Chica. Ebere continued. My daughter is getting married next week in the village. I want you and Mirabel to come. I have called Mirabel already, and she promised she would be there to support me. That's why I'm calling you as well. Chica's eyes widened. Oh, wow. Congratulations on your daughter's wedding, Ebere. This is good news. Thank you, Chica, Ebere replied. I hope to see you there as well. Ebere, I would have loved to come, but like you know, transportation to the east now is quite expensive, and I don't have that kind of money now, Chica said. Don't worry, Chica, I understand. I will send you transportation fare, so you don't have to worry about that, Ebere assured her. And after the wedding, we need to sit down and talk. Let me see how I can help you. Chica's heart skipped a beat. Oh, Ebere, thank you. I'll surely be there. The day of the trip arrived. Mirabel woke up early, packed her bags, and knelt beside her bed. She prayed earnestly. Father, as I travel today, please go before me, protect me, keep me safe from every danger in Jesus' name. She stood up, feeling at peace. Meanwhile, Chica was in her room, hurriedly packing her bags. She didn't pray. She didn't even think about it because she was still angry with God. She took her children to a neighbor's house. "Please take care of them till I return," she said, forcing a smile. The neighbor nodded. "Don't worry, they will be fine. Safe journey, Chica." "Thank you," Chica simply muttered. With her bag over her shoulder, she walked out of the house, unaware that this trip would change her life forever. The morning sun burned hot as Chica stood by the roadside, holding her small bag tightly. She looked up and down the highway, waiting for a Sole bus. Sole buses were cheaper than the regular buses from the park. Many travelers who wanted to save money stood on the roadside waiting for one to stop. Chica had no extra money to waste, so she chose Sole. On another part of the highway, Mirabel was doing the same. She had also decided to take Sole to save cost. A few minutes later, a bus slowed down in front of Mirabel and some other passengers standing by the roadside. Mirabel sighed in relief. Finally, a bus. She adjusted her bag and moved forward to enter. But as she reached the door, the conductor suddenly looked straight into her eyes. "Enter another bus," he said firmly. Something changed in his expression. The bus driver asked him to allow her to enter, but he frowned, then turned to the driver. "Abeg, make she no enter. Na bad market be this." Though he said this in a coded language that the other passengers didn't understand. The other passengers were already entering, squeezing into the small space inside the bus. But as Mirabel tried to follow them, the same man blocked her with his hand. Mirabel's face fell. "Why shouldn't I enter?" she questioned him. "No space," the conductor lied. Mirabel looked inside, and there was space. At least 3 more people could fit. She tried again, but the conductor's face darkened. "Madam, I say no space." His tone was final. She sighed in frustration. She had been standing under the hot sun for so long. Now, the first bus that stopped refused to carry her. As she stepped back, the bus sped off, disappearing into the highway. Mirabel shook her head. "God, why?" she muttered. She had no idea what God had just saved her from. Meanwhile, Chica was still standing at her own bus stop on the highway, under the hot sun, for what felt like forever. She wiped the sweat off her forehead and sighed. Her legs ached and her small bag felt heavier than before. When will a bus come, she thought. Just then, a bus slowed down in front of her. Her heart jumped in relief. Other passengers rushed toward the bus, pushing and struggling to enter. The journey to the east was long, and nobody wanted to be left behind. Chica clutched her bag tightly and pushed her way through the crowd. She squeezed past an elderly woman and ducked under a man's arm. Some people were still struggling, but she managed to get inside. She slid into a seat near the window, breathing hard. Finally, she thought. She leaned back against the seat, feeling some relief. She had no idea that she had just entered a bus she was never supposed to enter. The bus sped down the highway, the cool breeze blowing through the open windows. Chica stared outside, lost in thought. She imagined herself sitting with Ebere after the wedding, having a deep conversation. Maybe Ebere would offer her a job. Maybe she would give her some money to start a small business. Maybe, just maybe, this trip would be a turning point for her, she hoped. For the first time in a long while, she felt a small spark of hope. She sighed and adjusted in her seat. The journey was long, and she was already feeling drowsy. Just then, she noticed something strange. The man sitting beside her exchanged glances with another man behind her. Before she could react, a strong hand pressed a handkerchief over her nose from behind. Chica tried to scream, but everything went dark. She didn't know how long she was unconscious, but when she opened her eyes, the first thing she noticed was the silence. No bus, no passengers, no noise, only the sound of crickets and rustling leaves. Her body felt weak, her head pounded. She tried to move but couldn't. Her hands and legs were tied. She was in a forest, a lonely, quiet forest. Panic shot through her chest. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. Something was covering her mouth. She shook her head, struggling to breathe. A tape, a thick black tape, was tightly placed over her lips, silencing her completely. Her hands and legs were tied, so tightly that they felt numb. She struggled to move, twisting her body to the side. That was when she saw 3 other girls who were also tied up just like her. Their mouths were covered with tape too. Their eyes were wide with fear. One of the girls had tears streaming down her face. Another was shaking uncontrollably. The third girl was looking around desperately, as if searching for a way to escape. Chica's chest tightened. This was no ordinary kidnap, and she had walked right into it. Chica's body stiffened as she heard footsteps approaching. A tall man with a scar across his cheek squatted in front of her. He had cold, cruel eyes. "Unlock your phone," he ordered, holding it up. Chica stared at him, breathing hard. "What's your password?" he demanded again. She couldn't answer. The thick tape was still over her lips. The man sighed in frustration, realizing that there was a tape over her mouth. He reached forward and ripped the tape off her mouth. Pain shot through her skin, but at that moment, she didn't care. She screamed. She screamed with all the strength left in her. "Help! Somebody help me!" Her voice echoed through the empty forest. She screamed again and again. The man's face darkened. "You fool," he barked. "No one can hear you. This is a deep forest." Still, Chica kept screaming. The man clenched his fists. "You want to be stubborn, eh? Okay, we will teach you a lesson." Before Chica could react, more men stepped out from the shadows. She realized she had seen some of their faces in the bus. There were 5 men, rough, dangerous-looking men. One of them cracked his knuckles. Another pulled off his belt. Chica's stomach twisted in fear. Then the beating began. Slaps, punches, kicks. Pain exploded through her body as they hit her mercilessly. She fell to the ground, crying and begging. "Please, please let me go. I have little children to take care of. Please," she sobbed. But they only laughed. One of them grabbed her by the hair and yanked her up. "Shut up! If you have children, Uncle, you better cooperate with us." Chica's vision blurred with tears. Pain shot through every part of her body. Her lips were bleeding. Her arms ached, and her dress was torn. The kidnappers stood around her, laughing and making jest of her. One of them, with a deep scar on his forehead, pulled out a small phone from his pocket. He scrolled through his contacts and then dialed a number. The phone rang twice before someone picked up. A deep voice came through the phone. "Alhaji Rahman," the kidnapper said. "We have fresh meat available." A brief silence. Then Alhaji Rahman asked, "Can I get 2 fresh heads and 2 left breasts?" "Of course," the kidnapper replied, looking at Chica and the 3 other girls tied behind her. Alhaji Rahman chuckled. "Good. I am very much interested. How much?" 10 million naira, the kidnapper replied. Alhaji clicked his tongue. "Ah, that is too much now. I will pay 6 million. The kidnapper frowned. "No, Alhaji. These ones are fresh, healthy and strong. We cannot take less than 8 million. Alhaji Rahman was silent for a moment. Then he finally said, Fine, 8 million it is. I will send my boys to pick it up tomorrow. The kidnapper smiled. Good, we will be waiting. The call ended and Chica's breathing became heavy. Hey, tomorrow, she said in her mind. That meant the kidnappers would be eliminating 2 people. She looked at the other girls, realizing there were only 4, and they had less than 24 hours before the unbelievable would happen. Chica lay on the cold, dirty ground, her body shaking with silent sobs. Her heart ached as she thought about her children. Who will take care of them now? She pictured their little faces. Her first daughter, who always tried to act strong, her son, who still needed her warm hugs, and her last baby girl, who could barely sleep without hearing her voice. Tears poured down her face. Life was already hard for them, and now this. Will they ever know what happened to her? Will they keep waiting, thinking she would come back? She cried bitterly, her chest tightening with pain. Meanwhile, miles away in the village, Ebere and Mirabel sat in a large, beautifully decorated compound. The traditional wedding had already taken place. Music played in the background. Guests laughed and food was being served. But Ebere and Mirabel were not in the mood to celebrate. Ebere pressed her phone against her ear, pacing back and forth. Still not connecting, Mirabel asked anxiously. Ebere shook her head and sighed. I've called Chica more than 50 times, and her number is not even going through. Mirabel frowned. This is strange. She told me she was on her way traveling when I called her yesterday to inform her that I was on my way as well. How come she hasn't arrived up till now? Even if she took night bus, she's supposed to have arrived by now. Or did she change her mind or something? I doubt, because even if she changed her mind, at least she would call to inform me, Ebere said, looking worried. I'm just worried and hoping she's fine. I hope nothing bad has happened to her on her way. Mirabel bit her lip. Do you have another way to reach her? No, Ebere's voice was shaking now. Her number is the only one I have. They both exchanged a worried glance. Back in the forest, Chica lay there, weak and helpless. She had cried until no more tears could come out. Then, suddenly, Mirabel's words echoed in her mind. God has not forgotten you. She squeezed her eyes shut. She had refused to believe it then. She had been too angry, too frustrated, and tired of waiting for things to change. She had stopped praying. She had stopped believing. And now she needed God more than ever. For the first time in a long while, money didn't matter. All the struggles she had been facing, the rent, the school fees, they didn't matter anymore. What was the point of having money if she wasn't even alive? Right now, she only wanted one thing. Oh God, please, have mercy on me. Forgive me and spare my life. Her lips trembled as she whispered it over and over again in her heart. She didn't know if God was still listening, but this time she prayed anyway, with the whole of her heart. Not for money, not for comfort, just for mercy. Then she heard footsteps, heavy, slow footsteps coming closer. Her breath caught in her throat. As she lifted her head slightly, one of the kidnappers, a tall man with a deep scar across his arm, stepped into the dimly lit clearing. His face was cold, emotionless. He didn't even look at Chica. Instead, he turned to the 3 other girls who were tied behind her. You two, come here, he said, pointing at the first 2 girls. The girls' eyes widened with fear. They shook their heads, their muffled cries echoing in the deep forest. The man bent down, grabbed the first girl by her hair, and dragged her across a wide table. She kicked and struggled, but he was too strong. Then he grabbed the second girl. She screamed, trying to break free, but it was useless. Chica's heart pounded in her chest. Something terrible was about to happen. She could feel it. Right before her eyes, the man did things too horrific to describe. Chica wanted to close her eyes, but she couldn't. She wanted to block her ears, but the sounds filled the night air. Her body trembled. She had never seen such wickedness before. The other girl beside Chica, who was still tied, began shaking violently, her tears soaking the ground beneath her. Chica's stomach twisted in fear. Who would be next? She thought. Fear gripped her heart, but deep inside something stirred. She heard a voice in her spirit saying, "Praise me." The voice was so clear. With trembling lips, she started singing. It was low at first, but she continued. Her voice grew stronger. She sang through her pain. She sang through her fears. She sang with the whole of her heart. Tears ran down her face as she worshipped God like never before. Suddenly, one of the kidnappers stormed out of the wooden shack. "Shut up," he barked. "Your noise is disturbing us." Chica looked up at him, her face soaked in tears. "Please," she said, her voice breaking, "let me at least praise my God, even if this will be the last." The kidnapper coughed, then waved his hand. Chica lifted her voice even louder. She sang of God's power. She sang of His mercy. She sang of His mighty hand to save. Then something strange happened. From inside the shack, she heard raised voices. At first, it was just murmuring, but within minutes, the kidnappers were arguing. The arguments got louder and louder. Chica paused, listening carefully. She could hear them shouting at each other. Something about money. They were fighting over the money from Alaji. Chica's spirit leaped inside her. She felt it. She knew God was already moving on her behalf. Then, a gunshot rang through the air. Chica froze. Then she heard them shouting even more with running footsteps. Confusion had taken over the group. Before Chica knew it, a man stumbled out of the shack. His left hand was badly broken. His voice was twisted in pain. He rushed towards Chica and the last girl tied beside her. With shaking hands, he untied them. "Run!" he panted. "Run as fast as you can." Chica didn't even wait for him to complete his statement. She ran for her life. Chica ran and ran, her legs weak, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know where she was going. She didn't even care. She just needed to get far away from that terrible place. After what felt like forever, she stumbled onto an express road. It was dark, almost 11 p.m. The night was quiet, except for the distant sounds of crickets and the occasional roar of a speeding car. Chica waved frantically at the oncoming vehicles. "Help me, please help me," she cried. But one after the other, the cars sped past her. Some of the drivers looked at her but quickly drove off. She was dirty, her clothes torn, her hair scattered. She looked dangerous. Many people feared she could be part of a trap, a trick used by kidnappers to lure unsuspecting victims. Chica felt hopeless. "Oh God, after all this, am I still going to be stranded here?" She shivered, rubbing her arms. The night air was cold. Then she heard the sound of another vehicle approaching. It was an old commercial bus. She weakly lifted her hand, expecting the driver to pass like the others. But this time, the bus slowed down. Then it stopped. The driver, a middle-aged man with a kind face, leaned out. "Sister, what are you doing here at this time of the night?" he asked. His voice was firm but concerned. Chica could barely speak. I was kidnapped," she stammered. But I escaped." The driver's eyes widened. He looked around as if checking for danger. Then he sighed. Thank God you're alive," he said. "This place is not safe. Nobody should be walking here at night." Chica nodded, her lips trembling. "Please, sir, "Help me," she whispered. The man didn't hesitate. "Come inside," he said, opening the door. Weakly, Chica climbed into the bus. The driver didn't take her to a police station or drop her by the roadside. Instead, he took her home. When they arrived, his wife and children came outside. They gasped when they saw Chica's condition. His wife immediately rushed to her. "My sister, what happened to you?" she asked, her voice full of concern. Chica tried to speak, but her voice broke into sobs. The woman gently took her hand. "Don't worry, you are safe here." That night, they bathed her, gave her clean clothes, and fed her. For the first time in days, Chica felt warmth. She didn't know these people, but through them, she felt God's love again. Back in Lagos, Ebere and Mirabel had returned. Chica was still nowhere to be found. She had vanished without a trace. As soon as they arrived in Lagos, the first place they went to was Chica's house. They knocked on her door, but there was no response. Then her neighbor stepped out of her apartment. She looked worried. "Ah, thank God you people came," the neighbor said, adjusting the wrapper tied around her chest. "I have been trying Chica's number for days, but her phone is switched off." Ebere and Mirabel exchanged glances. "You mean you haven't seen her either?" Mirabel asked. "No," the woman replied, "and her children have been with me since she left for the east." Ebere gasped. "So you mean Chica has not been home for days?" she asked again. The neighbor nodded. A deep fear settled in their hearts. "We need to go to the police station," Mirabel said. "We have to report this." Ebere agreed. The neighbor also decided to go with them. They planned to go the next morning. The next morning, the neighbor was in her kitchen washing dishes. She was still thinking about Chica, wondering where Chica could be and hoping nothing bad had happened to her. Then she heard a faint knock on her door. Who could that be this early? She thought. She wiped her wet hands on her wrapper and walked to the door. Her eyes widened. Her mouth dropped open. Chica! There she was, standing at the door, alive. But her face was swollen. Her eyes looked tired and sunken. Her lips were cracked. She looked like someone who had been to hell and back. The neighbor froze. She didn't know whether to scream in joy or cry in fear. Chica! What happened to you? She gasped. Chica opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Instead, she burst into tears. Chica cried uncontrollably at the door. Her neighbor held her close, rubbing her back gently. Chica, what happened? The neighbor asked in a shaky voice. Chica took a deep breath and began to narrate her ordeal. She told her about the merciless beatings, the fear of death, and how she remembered Mirabel's words about never giving up on God. She described how she started praying and praising God, and how a sudden fight among the kidnappers led to her miraculous escape. The neighbor screamed in thanksgiving. Jesus! You're too great! She shouted, raising her hands. What a mighty God! Just then, Chica's children came out of the neighbor's house. They had woken up from sleep, wondering why their neighbor was shouting. When they saw their mother, their little faces lit up. But their smiles quickly faded when they saw her bruised face and swollen lips. Mommy, what happened to you? Her eldest child asked. Chica fell to her knees. She held her children close and sobbed. My children, God has given me a second chance. She lifted her hands and thanked God from the depths of her heart. The neighbor quickly picked up her phone and called Ebere and Mirabel. Chica is back! She shouted into the phone. Within minutes, Ebere and Mirabel rushed to Chica's house. The moment they saw her, they ran to hug her tightly. Chica, Mirabel cried. God, you're good. We've been so worried about you. Thank you, Jesus, she whispered. After hearing Chica's ordeal, Ebere took Chica and her children to her house that same day. She made sure Chica ate well and rested. When Chica was feeling better, Ebere gave Chica a huge sum of money to start a business. She also paid all the school fees for Chica's children. She even settled her house rent. Chica couldn't believe it. She knelt before Ebere, crying again. "Ebere, how can I ever thank you?" she sobbed. "Thank God, not me," Ebere smiled. "He's the one that has saved you." Chica's life turned around. She started her own business and was able to take care of her children. But most importantly, she never stopped praying again. She shared her testimony in church. "God is real," she testified. "Even when I was angry with him, he never left me. He saved me when I least expected it." Dear viewers, the major lesson to learn from this story: no matter how hard life gets, never stop trusting, praying, and praising God. Even when it seems like nothing is changing, God is always working behind the scenes. At the right time, he will turn things around in ways you never expected, just like he did for Chica. Psalm 50 verse 15 says, "Call on me in the day of trouble. I will deliver you, and you will honor me." And if you've enjoyed the story so far, do consider giving it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done so. We also have other interesting stories as this on this channel. Do well to watch them. Stay blessed. See you in my next one.